feel like just.
Okay,
Okay, can we get the group back? Hand up.
go.
Grade school. I should have brought my bell. I have a bell. It's really nice to hear conversations. Keep going though. Okay. Okay, and you can just like scooch around a little bit so you're not like, because we're gonna get back into our groups, but we're gonna have a, maybe like a few minutes between each group. Wait, can I get Ray? Who wants to share something they learned about themselves? We don't want to hear about the other side and how horrible they are. What did you learn about yourself as you went through this exercise?
And I don't know.
Oh, please, yeah. Get us going. Get us started.
Yeah, maybe willing. So this is vulnerable, and I admit it. I was telling my group, I have often been surrounded by people who don't agree with me, close to me. So sometimes when I get in a group with people who share my views pretty exactly, it was at number 5, I feel a little rush of pleasure. I admit it. I get a dopamine hit when we're agreeing about things that bother us, or we feel, contemporary parts of our life, however, I don't want to get too involved, but I wasn't totally psyched about that, but I'm admitting it.
But we're all here to learn, right? Anybody else want to share? What did you learn about yourself? Yeah.
I was surprised that number 2 and 3 I was often. And
with this, I put the questions back up.
Self-serving or negative motives to the other group, positive to my group, and we're focusing more on the extreme news on the left and the right. And I didn't used to be that way. And I think it's my way of coping, because this is affecting me mentally. I'm sure it is for a lot of people. And I need, that's why I'm taking the class, because I really need to learn how to cope effectively with these conversations and what's all that news is coming into us. And what can I do on my level to make it better? So.
And thank you for using, I love the use word coping, just being aware that like, oh, maybe, I'm using this, artificially rather than, would I act like this? And we're going to get into, strategies of how to counteract that. But, good for you for being aware of that. Hey, one more brave person want to share something that they learned? No? Okay.
I actually took this first session the last time.
Oh, I remembered you. You're familiar.
Yeah. And I thought it was so valuable to learn about myself humbly. But I was kind of bummed to realize I still am filling out often. I thought I'd made progress, and but I have to say the last couple weeks have ramped it up for me. And I especially when I hear really negative things about certain groups of people, like demonizing certain groups of people I know and love, like that, I get especially upset, like in defense of them. So I'm so gosh, I have lots of work to do.
But also recognize that major events do tend to ramp up, and now you need to be extra diligent. And absolutely the number one thing I get as comment after every single workshop I've ever done for 6 years is, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much practice this takes. So it's continuing to remind yourself about that. And next week we're going to go into the skills again. So that's more the talking and listening, and that's another thing that needs practice. It's an hour and a half class. I just wanted to remind everybody. So it's a blend right into there. So what we learned today about depolarizing, how can you take that into, today it's going to be talking to like-minded people. Next week it's going to be, how do I talk across the aisle and keep those feelings going. So thank you for sharing. Now I skipped ahead, so now I need to catch up. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is, how do I counteract my inner polarizer? So thanks for the people that said like, oh yeah, it's there. It doesn't go away easily. None of us are saints, except maybe TJ. But how do we counteract those inner polarizing? So how do I offset those thoughts when you catch yourself in the act of doing that? What are ways to do it? We want to edit that story before it comes out of our mouths. or gets even further embedded in our brain. So we're going to go through some of the first thing that we tend to do is we stereotype the other side, right? So I'm going to go through some political stereotypes. Now these came from conducting our red blue workshops for like years and years, and how each side thinks the other side sees them. So see if these is, you know, you can relate to any of these, like this is how I see the other side. So reds think that blues see them, the reds, as racist, anti-immigrant, uncaring about those in need, homophobic, anti-women, anti-science, and Bible thumpers. On the other side, blues think when reds look at them, what they see is somebody that's arrogant and elitist, favor big government, they're fiscally irresponsible, unpatriotic, anti-religious, anti-free speech, and they're hypersensitive snowflakes. So if those are the thoughts, you know, for next week, we're going to use these too when we're talking, you know, to the people on the other side. You know, think about how much these things armor you up when you're going into a conversation. But today we're going to say, how many times do those thoughts land in my head as I'm going into a conversation, and how can I work on that myself?
What is snowflakes?
Oh, oh, you can't say that to me. It's me. Yeah, like, yeah. It's that attitude of, you know, you can't say any nasty words, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to say stuff. Yeah. It's that. Yeah. Okay. So how do we challenge our stereotypes? One of the first things is just remind ourselves that things are more varied than we think. Everybody's not a monolith. And that's when we do that exercise, we say, think of that monolith. But the first thing you can do is say, like, does this person really fit into that stereotype of the monolith? Or what's a variation on that particular person? It's often more complicated. You know, problems are complicated until you dig into the complexity of an issue. How do you know that that's how somebody thinks? Pick any one of those topics. You know, somebody makes a comment about racism. Racism was extremely complicated. We still haven't solved it. What have we done about, you know, climate change? We still haven't solved that. It's very complicated. Next thing to do is think about somebody else's life experiences. If I could boil down Braver Angels into one single question that we teach people, it's to ask that question, what in your life experiences led you to this view? We'll do more of that next week too. But just be asking that in your head as you're talking about the other side. Developing relationships. If you know one person from the other side, you know, maybe they're more representative, and you can start to see other people in the same light. I had somebody at a workshop last Sunday who said, oh, I would have answered the questions in the horseshoe thing. I would have answered it totally different when I talked about my daughter than the large swath of people. And, you know, we're all kind of like, yeah. You know, we would think so, you know, but can you bring that feeling of how you feel about your daughter or your favorite next door neighbor into your larger conversations when you're talking about the other side? You can do a little bit more exploration, read some thought leaders on the other side, and maybe find some things that, you know, maybe there aren't as many disagreements as I thought. You know, here's a person I agree with 50%, 80%. You know, and they'll help you with that depolarizing. You know, and if you're really like a lot of time on your hands, you know, some of us who are retirees, research the history of the other side. Where did that movement come from? How did it get there? And these are all going to arm you with questions you can ask yourself and questions that you can ask the other side. And the other tactics, so this is one set of, you know, how you can challenge that polarizer. The other side thing is making distinctions. So we found it helpful to distinguish between positions and people. Don't lump a person because they happen to be on one side too. It's like, oh, you're red, you must think this about this issue. You know, that's not necessarily true. So separate that person from the position. You can have huge disagreements with a position, doesn't mean that person on that side, or even if they hold that position, is really an awful person.
Being like Uncle Bob.
River Angel's our favorite uncle is Uncle Fred, but Uncle Bob works just as well. Yes, thank you. Exactly. Don't assume everybody's Uncle Bob, Uncle Fred. We have an Aunt Margaret too, because we like to be, you know, not don't want to pick on any one gender. So distinguish policies and values. Something that comes up often, and we do a lot of exercises on, you know, finding the values behind an issue. So a good example in this one is, you know, what to do about policing. And notoriously, both sides will have an issue. They say they value safety. Yay, it's something we have in common. So don't consider like how you resolve an issue of policing, which you may have disagreements, and you can talk about that. But focus on what's the value behind that policy instead of the policy itself. And the last one, try to make a distinction between inconsistency and hypocrisy. And I like to say here, it's like, what if you think of if somebody called you a hypocrite, you're a hypocrite, versus that position seems inconsistent with, you know, one thing or the other. Can you tell me more? It leaves you open to more questions of curiosity. So keep that curiosity going in your mind and saying, is it just inconsistent? Can I get rid of that thought of hypocrisy and substitute it with thinking that maybe it's just inconsistent, and get curious. Okay, so I'm going to give you another minute. I'm going to put the kind of toggle between the slides. How can you resist, you know, it's stereotyping? Do you use one of these? Challenging how to challenge your stereotypes. Do you have a example or a preferred method for one of these distinctions, or do you use something else? So I'm going to give you one more minute just to reflect, write a couple notes, and then we're going to go back into our groups again. So I'm going to start the timer for 1 minute. Just jot down which one of those, and if the strategies are in your handout as well, so I don't have to keep going back to the slides. You know, what distinctions or strategies do you find helpful or would like to work on as you work on depolarizing yourself? So I'm going to give you 1 minute right now, and then we're going to go back into groups and share. Another 20 seconds up, and then we'll share. I'm hearing a lot of really good conversations. Yeah. Okay, please come back to the front. Okay. Yeah. You'll get more chance to talk. I love the conversation. We're gonna share as a group now. Yeah. And they he said multiple more things. Yeah. Okay. Are we wrapping? Can I get this first to wrap up and yeah.
All right, we're going to gather back up in the large group.
Yeah, your voice is louder than mine.
Yeah. So finishing small group conversations.
Well, I promised Tina would get you out of here in time. So, and I think we're doing pretty good. Okay. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna do, you know, a few minutes to share. What were some of our favorite ways to not stereotype? What distinctions do you make? What strategies do you use? Can I get a few people to share with us what they came up with? How would you handle Uncle Bob back there?
I was telling you, one of the things that I do is I imagine my car breaking down in the middle of Idaho. And not Idaho, but Idaho is a pretty conservative place.
It
And I think this is true, 9 times out of 10 or more, somebody would stop to help me and say, oh, can I give you a ride into town to, you know, to help you in the situation, because that person understands my plight. And I'm thinking, well, I might not agree with anything if we discuss politics, but we can agree that, boy, when your car breaks down, you got trouble, and helping out your neighbors is a good thing to do. So that's, I think about that person and think, well, they're probably not terrible people. We may disagree about lots of things, but they're not terrible people.
Yeah, I love that. It's separating the person from the policies that they belong to. And a question I sometimes start out meets with this, so like, if your neighbor's house was on fire and you know that person was of a different political party, how would that factor into your calling 911? Exactly. So same thing. If my car broke down, I would not want that person going like, well, I'm gonna, check out his, his party affiliation before I help him change his tire or drag him out of the ditch.
Yeah. No, you would in a heartbeat. You'd say, oh, this is a person who needs help.
Yes, right. Because we're people first, and we have a party affiliation second.
Right.
That's why I love doing things in church. Because you all get that. Yes, please.
If you take the second to last bullet and make it, instead of thought leaders on the other side, but thought leaders on both sides, where you see two people of different political persuasions agreeing to work together because they found common ground. I think that's a way of overcoming a stereotype.
Yes.
Because you've seen how complex the issue is and what the common ground is.
Exactly. Another comment I hear frequently when we do things like the Common Ground workshop that I mentioned, we also have debates where we debate an issue, and it's all about like listening and asking questions. And invariably at the end, someone gets mad, not because of what happened, but why can't we make our politicians do it like this? Right? And bring that together, because that is the heart of the common ground, is like taking two different issues, and we will give people views from both sides. And then say, now let's come up with a group and see how we can talk through this. What are those things that we can all agree on? I've done common ground on abortion, and I've had people walk in the room and say, there is no way we're going to find a single thing to agree on. And they walk out with 5 or 10 things that they've agreed on, going like, oh, who knew? Who knew? You can only know if you do what you said. We want to look at both sides, especially look at the both sides who are working together. Yeah. Yes, please.
I think part of that is stopping and thinking before you react.
Yes.
I mean, I can tend to fly off the handle quickly without stopping and thinking before I make my point.
Yes.
And I don't make my point when I'm reacting.
Yeah, and that reaction is what you need to catch yourself in the act. Another one of my favorite comments, I've been doing this for 6 years, I have a lot of stories, was, we'll do a checkout at the end. And what's the one thing you learned? And the woman raised her hand. She's a graduate student, so pretty smart. I figured out I have a really good filter between my brain and what comes out of my mouth, but I have no filter between my brain and my face. Right? So so being able to catch yourself in the moment, because you said, just if I can catch myself in the moment, and stop it there, that is so powerful to not, that, look on your face, gives it all away. And that's just as damaging as, calling somebody a bad name, or, jumping to spewing a different conclusion back at them. Right? So thank you for sharing. Can we take maybe like one more? What's the strategy you want to work on? Yes.
To first of all, not to react, but to really listen to what they're saying. And then obviously if there's a disagreement, or just this is not logical to me at all, then I'll just say, well, how did you come to that decision? What experiences have you had in that area that you believe that so strongly? Because I'm confused.
Yeah.
And I think for them, most people will say, oh, okay, well, this is how I came here because of this experience or what I saw or what I read and everything. And I'm trying to ask more questions and listen. Because then I feel like I have a better way of reacting, saying, I get this, I get point A, but I can't see the connection between point A and point B. I'm having a really hard time, because if I were agreeing with you on point A, I'd go to point C. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And it just takes so much more energy to listen and really, say my goal is to not lose this person.
Yeah.
Because I've lost very dear friends over this issue. And I put the olive branch out there and they want nothing to do with me and my husband. And so I'm just like, okay, well, that's their decision. And they know I'm open, but it's not gonna happen and they don't wanna step forward, that's fine. But moving forward, my husband and I agree, we do not wanna lose friends or family over this. We need to figure out how we can discuss it with them. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's what we're all about. You know, the relationships are more important than the issues. And you just said like the advanced class for next week, which that's what that's all about, is learning to listen, and ask really good questions before you like jump in with your perspective. But again, just the first step is, to notice that polarized reaction, depolarize it, and then you're going to be able to jump into that, listening and acknowledging with a lot more skill behind it.
There's so much anger right now.
Yeah.
That's what I want to be.
And that's another thing that like shows up on it, tone and, in your voice, that we go right to anger. And just knowing when you're going into a conversation, aware, like, can I take the temperature down before I go in there, and do it for yourself before. That's why I like to do this class first. Right? Yeah, we depolarize ourselves before we go into any conversations. Anybody else, or we'll continue on? We're gonna move on. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Okay, so what do I say instead? So when you are talking, how do I talk about the other side in a non-polarizing way? So let's go through first some mistakes to avoid. When you're talking about the other side, avoid using pejorative labels. I have my favorite list here. Don't call people wingnuts or Bible thumpers or libtards or snowflakes. Now I know what that is. Anybody have a favorite example? The bad name that they can, called to the other side. Yeah, gullibles. Oh, gullibles. I don't know if I've heard. Yeah, they're just they're the gullibles. Yeah.
Well, lately there's been Hitler has been thrown out, and a lot of the really, really strong fascists. And
the really nasty stuff. You must be a fascist or a Nazi. One I've heard on both sides is people starting to call each other terrorists. Yeah. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, some of these words we put into our workshops, 4 years ago, are starting to sound a little plain. The temperature has gone up, and it's up to us to bring it down. So those, watch that labeling talk. Just saying they all, this is, I mean, we've all heard this a lot more lately. It's not us, it's them. Who is the them? So just catch yourself when you're talking about them. Can you put a better distinction on who the them is? That's probably one of the more polarizing. And it's like, wait a minute, it's not me. You had a good example about, there's A, B, and C choices. Are they really in all those buckets?
What are libtards?
Oh, that was Rush Limbaugh coined that term. That's what he used to call liberals.
Oh,
and it's a concatenation of two words. And
yes,
yeah,
not nice.
I think it's maybe he said that since Rush Limbaugh's passed, maybe that phrase has gone by the wayside. But yeah, and good for you for not knowing that term. Thank you. Yes, it's politer company. You use polite words. Next thing is not confusing the supporters with the politicians that they supported. Just because somebody voted for a certain politician, think of your least favorite one. don't think that they 100% share all our views or just immediately start dumping them into the same bucket. You know, if I voted for this person, I must believe 100%, or they must believe 100% of what that person stands for. Right? So don't just, you know, separate that out. And I heard a lot in the last election, you know, I held my nose and voted for somebody, right? So it's especially bad to put those in, you know, I voted on, you know, party lines instead of, you know, it wasn't my favorite candidate, but I looked at the other side and I didn't like it. So don't confuse supporters with the politicians that they support. And I think this came up, somebody said this in the comment, you know, criticizing the motive instead of the idea. A phrase I like to use is, you know, we judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by our behavior. It's a common, if we have any psychologists in the room, that's a common thing. So like, you know, what are you judging? What are you judging? You know, you're assuming motives, and that's another place to get start asking those curious questions. And you know, what is the motive? And maybe somebody's just throwing an idea out there, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, well, you know, tell me more about that. And when you figure out why they want to do it, back to life experiences. You know, if you can get the life experiences behind that. So stay away from motives until you had a chance to actually find out what that motive is. So what do we do instead? So when we're talking about the other side, some things to do is, you know, feel free to criticize your own side. You know, you could say, you know, we're losing this other group because we haven't listened to them. You know, so what has your side done wrong? And I got some examples. So, you know, sometimes our leaders talk as if they have the final answer to fill in the blank. But I'm not sure they do. Right. So go ahead and you know, you don't have to throw your side under the bus, but it's okay to give a little criticism once in a while. See if you can find a positive thing on the other side. You know, is there a value or something that they did that you like? You know, an example could be something like, you know, I read a, you know, liberal or conservative commentator who said something interesting about this. You know, like you said, you know, it helps to look at both sides. And you can find out like, oh, they agreed on that. They're maybe not so bad. They have some positive things as well. And the other thing to try is the eavesdropper experiment. So when you're listening to your self-talk, and you're tempted to use that polarizing language, pretend there's somebody else on the other side sitting across the room listening to you. Would they feel, you know, respected or disrespected? Would they feel ridiculed or would they feel welcome? So that's a thought experiment. So we're going to do another quick reflection. So we've just looked at some mistakes to avoid, and we've looked at some what to do instead. So I'm going to give you like 1 minute to do just like a reflection, and these are in your handout as well. You know, pick one of those or pick one of each, a mistake and a something to do instead, and think about what would you like to do to be better at polarizing language and using depolarizing language instead. So I'm going to give you 1 minute and then we're going to get back into groups again. So take 1 minute, pick one of those things and decide what you want to work on. 12:30. And I'll hang out a little bit afterwards. More questions. So what can I get a couple of people to share? What depolarizing strategy would you like to work on? The favorite one of those things or mistakes to avoid? Yes.
Well, reading more about opinions from the other side. You know, looking for reasonable voices.
Yeah.
From the other side.
Right. And then and this is for you know, when you're talking to somebody too, so you can use more
right.
as examples.
Right. You have a viewpoint that is reasonable, that you can say, well, I did like what so and so said.
Yeah.
And that would tend to say, oh, well, then obviously Jeff isn't crazy.
Yeah. Well, can I caution you on one thing? Don't assume that what you think is reasonable, but somebody else is gonna think is reasonable.
No, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
if I'm quoting their guy,
Yeah.
then they may think, oh, well, that's perfect.
Internally, you think this is reasonable. Let me test this out on you, but don't say, no, this is reasonable. Don't you think that too? Because that's you want to start raising those leading questions, and that's going to be a lot next week too. When you ask the question. Yes.
I think a couple of people have spoken to this, but when I think about depolarizing, I'll be frank, I am so angry and so afraid that I can't even get to these. And I guess that's my higher level question, because I think that's true across the spectrum. And every single day I wake up to another headline, news story, something that makes me more afraid for my country, for my children's future, for where the world is going, for all of it. So I can't even get to this place yet. And I'm not sure how to unpack that first level.
Angry and angry. Yeah, and there's a lot of that. And the first step is awareness of your anger, right? And again, these tactics, strategies are hard, and they work on it. And start with those one-on-one conversations. Is there somebody I disagree with this much that I'm gonna start that with? And then maybe I can move over here a little bit and over here. And over time it gets, easier. And that, the one strategy I, would encourage you to kind of separate the people from what you're hearing the politicians say. Because I'm personally, we, in Brave Angels, we routinely bring groups of reds and blues together. And when you're sitting across the table from somebody, you're having a discussion and you're saying, what are the issues that are important to you? I had some of those discussions not too long ago. We just, agreed on that the middle class needs to be robust, the role of religion in politics. And I'm like, wait, they come from unexpected places, and just starting with those one-on-one conversations with somebody who, you think is, you think internal, you think is reasonable, they, tell me more. And then that also helps bring the temperature down. And the other thing is just start by trying to model that behavior. Modeling that behavior in yourself is what elicits it in somebody else.
Well, we're at such a broad point of not agreeing on values, right? We're touching on core values on both sides that I think are really hard to get past.
And the next week, some of that,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please, go.
That you're unwilling to, that you're not seeing what they're thinking. And so that makes you so angry. What the other side is thinking may not be what you think it is.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what she's saying. I think that express, talk about it, you might come down to less fear about it or.
Thank you. That I'm sorry. Well, no, I love it. No, this makes me like, oh, but yeah, what I'm saying is, thinking and people are starting to get it. And just look at yourself, where is that anger coming from? And try to tamp it down. Be aware of it before you go into those conversations, and start with the easier conversations when talking about the other side. And that's if we make a good faith effort on whatever side you're on, is eliciting better faith effort on the other side. And I'm here to tell you, I've done a zillion of these. It's not helpful to get, being angry at the other side of the things that are causing some of the things we've seen in the last 15 years, right? That is not helpful. I think that's a point coming up here, but it is really not helpful to pull back. We need to jump in with both feet right now. Yes,
it's about thinking before reacting.
Yeah, the concept, one of the books that's out on Brave Angels website is Thinking Fast and Slow. And it really is, that's really the heart of it. And actually, two of our, a little off topic of the workshop, but there's two of our, members of Braver Angels. There's a presentation. They're both psychologists and therapists, and they do about like how your brain gets hijacked and what we can do to be more resilient in those. And that's what I'm hearing this. It's a resiliency issue.
Yeah, because every day your brain's getting hijacked my brain is being hijacked by floodings of every single day. And
exactly.
It is very hard in that environment to find to
yeah, and yeah, those tactics, there's a sign up sheet if you want to get on Braver Angels, list subscriptions, because they do that presentation every once in a while, and it was fabulous, and everybody really loved it, and it's based on, real, neurological, psychologists speak, talk on how to be resilient and not let those things hijack your brain, and what to do instead. It was fascinating. I can't repeat the whole thing. But it was a really, really well received presentation, and they do it every so often. So yes, ma'am.
Christ does over and over in coming into any group. Fear not. So where is our faith and our praying and our studying the scripture bringing us? It certainly isn't bringing us to the news headlines of the day.
Thank you. Another reason I love doing this in churches is we can remind ourselves of that, and it's okay. Yeah. So thank you. Anybody else, or we'll keep going. But yeah, acknowledge that it's hard for starters. And yes.
The thing that keeps coming up in our conversation, but just why I joined Braver Angels to some extent anyway. Also speaking to your anger, because I empathy for that. And the brain hijacking is I'm trying to think always, how can I create a safe space for, first? Because I think that if we don't feel safe speaking out, and the events that have happened recently make that worse, I think, at least in me, if I think I'm somehow survival, and I use that word loosely, is at stake, it's hard to not have your brain hijacked. Reptilian brain, whatever, I don't get that neuroscience, but we're hardwired to survive first. So if us or kids or whomever we think other side or whomever is like the lion and gonna come eat us for dinner, it can be very hard to stay calm. And I think it is this practice of, I think most people want safety first. I think that maybe is a basic human value. And then what I'm learning today is reminding curiosity can help keep me safe, because some of my fear, and it's fear more for me, gets triggered because I make assumptions. I don't even know I'm doing that. Again, the prejudices, making assumptions. I have to stay curious and just keep asking questions and not assume I know what the other side's going to say. It comes into active listening, which is super hard as well when you're getting triggered. But I think if you think safety first, and maybe you even say to someone before you start chatting, can we agree to try to make this safe? Maybe this is a way we both feel comfortable. I'm thinking about Thanksgiving dinner, for example. And I think curiosity and trying to be objective and not put yourself onto the other person. I think a mistake a lot of us make is, well, they all think like us, and if they don't think like us, then again, they're the lion. That's not true though. Our lives really are at stake, right? It just feels like it.
Exactly. And then, part of that, like you're going into survival mode. And the other thing that I was thinking is Andy was talking, just remember, we have no control over changing others. We can only control ourselves. So, and that's what this class is about. It's about, we can try to depolarize ourselves first, right? And then next week we're going to go into the more the curiosity and the active listening. But if you know you're getting triggered, you're ready to pounce, that immediately shuts down any conversations. So if we can all be more prepared, take agency amongst ourselves, to lower the temperature, and say, what am I doing to contribute? That's automatically not creating that safe place to talk. And again, if we don't, the other person might not be welcoming to make it a safe place, but we have to start with ourselves.
I think what you said about role modeling, because again, as humans, right? So if you walk in and someone's already negative or they're angry or whatever, it's hard to, again, keep the temperature down. But if you walk in yourself, to your point, say, I don't know, I'm gonna be open, you know, I'm okay, I can handle this, and you role model safe no matter kind of what they're doing. It also takes, what do they say, the oxygen away from the fire.
Yes.
Because anger or fear, sadly, is contagious. But I think so is safety.
Exactly.
Or inclusive.
Exactly. And I'm just watching time. So we'll wrap it up. But thank for excellent feedback from everybody. Okay, so the last thing we're gonna do is back a little bit is now what are those strategies for speaking with your polarized friends? So now, you said, oh, I'm starting to be depolarized. Now I'm speaking to somebody on my own side who is super polarized. So it might be, that they're, what we would call the fringe of your side, or they just, they're the ones still on that dopamine fix and like, let's call names and stereotype and make assumptions. And isn't that fun to rant and rave? Let's all get in our group and just, dismiss, ridicule, speak with contempt and stereotype the other side. What if you're talking to somebody on our own side? So we're just gonna review some strategies for what happens in that situation. Some of these are going to look a little familiar because some of the strategies we use to depolarize ourselves are also helpful when we have a super polarized friend to remind them. So first thing to remind somebody is, there's more variation in the perspective. This came up a couple times. So just saying to that super polarized person, I've been learning that not everyone on the other side thinks that. You gave a couple examples. I've read something. We've had good examples on that. Say that to your polarized friend. Remind them it's more complicated than it looks. So something like, I see more complexity in why some people support or oppose that idea. It's not just that they're uninformed. So just offer another perspective on something how it's more complicated. Remind your polarized friends that people come from different backgrounds. And it's something that you can say is something like, it's easy for me to judge them supporting, whatever. But it's, I'm not in their shoes, and then now you're encouraging your polarized friend to go talk with, somebody from the other side in a more respectful manner and encouraging them to ask, people about different life experiences. Another thing, you're talking to your friend, remind them, I don't agree with them on this, but our side's time's been overly alarmist. So somebody who's polarized may benefit from that phrase like that. Also remind, and I think I did this a minute ago, just remind our polarized friends it's not useful to dismiss them. I told you this Bright Rangers was founded by a marriage and family counselor. And the one thing he said is the only difference is we can't decide to end up getting a divorce. We're in the same country that the people are not going the way. We can't say half the people need to move. How can we work together better rather than just, get back to the dismissing or ridiculing them. So let's see if we can, can't we just all get along? We have a Christian quote that we can put in, probably many we can all think of. Okay, so the other thing is when you're let's say you're in a conversation with somebody that's super polarized and they're just like ranting about the other side. The first thing is to expect pushback, because people are going to say, wait a minute, are you defending that side? You're asking me to be nice to who I think is the enemy. They're all horrible people. Why are you being nice? Why are you being nice and defending them? So the tactic here is just to reassure them, hey, I'm on your side. We're on the same side here. I just don't think it's helpful. And then you go back into some of those strategies, reminding them differences of opinion where somebody's life experience and reassure, but then move on to, one of those strategies for how you can talk to them instead. And you may have to go through multiple rounds of this. And the longer version of this, which we're not doing today, is, how to listen to somebody who's polarized and what you might say instead and being able to practice that. Next week, we're going to do those listening skills, but remember the listening, acknowledging, and perspective skills that we're going to teach next week also apply to speaking to somebody on your own side who is super polarized. That same formula that Mike's going to do with you next week is in there. And then if you find, maybe it's not Uncle Bob, maybe it's Uncle Fred. Fred's on your side and he just wants to rant, and you can't shut it down. It's okay just to exit a conversation. And maybe that's the something that's good for you. If you know you're easily triggered or angered, like save yourself from taking it. We talked about modeling or your emotional view, seeps into the people around you. If you're starting to feel like, yeah, I'm getting all worked up here, graceful exit, pass the macaroni, and yeah. Yes.
I think there's some red flag words though that get people off kilter. It's like, why did you do that? What makes you say that? Is it the tone? It's the word you use. It's more a lot that has to do with the tone of voice.
Yeah.
And the allowance for a little bit of flexibility. That why word gets people off kilter,
yeah.
I think.
Tone, and because I use almost exactly that phrase often as an example, because you can say, why do you think that?
Yeah.
And why do you think that? Are same words, two completely different meanings, right? So it's like catching yourself. And if you can't get into that space of that, keeping that tone, respectful, or think of other words, your reptile brain's probably been hijacked and it's time to just walk away. Take a few deep breaths and then come back and engage with, ranty uncle who just wants you to sit there and listen to how bad the other side is, and won't listen to any kind of hey, let's bring the temperature down kind of tactics. Okay. Any questions on that? We're not going to do a breakout. Because we're on time. We're just going to do some final thoughts here, and then I'm going to get some final thoughts from you. So one thing to know, being a depolarizer is actually being pragmatic about the future. We are never going to solve anything unless we end that severe polarization that we're dealing with, and that's kind of the heart of Braver Angels altogether. And I think I've said this all along, your depolarizing influence is apt to occur over time. You have to model that. They don't expect to, walk into a conversation and say, like, oh, I went to a Braver Angels workshop, so now I'm all perfect about, depolarizing. So depolarizing ourselves and helping to depolarize our like-minded friends, and then talking to the people on the other side, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. So I'm just going to encourage you, keep trying, be aware. Awareness is the first step when you're getting into those that polarizing mindset and about to launch. And come to the workshop next week because you're going to keep learning. The ultimate goal is when you're end up talking to somebody, even on the other side, is being able to explain to the other side's views so that they say, oh, you really got me. But the first step is depolarizing yourself before, you can talk to somebody on the other side with empathy and grace and being able to acknowledge what they said without it angering you and getting into that, other sidesism. And then here's a hard one, but this is a good practice to get, you can try practicing your inner opposite. Can you, and I like what you said about, taking articles on both sides and comparing it. Views on both sides, try channeling, if you're a blue, channel your inner red. If you're a red, channel your inner blue and try to get into that mindset of what does the other side think? That's a great building empathy is kind of the key to all of this. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. So there's a couple things. TJ has there's a paper on your desk to give feedback to him. River Angels would also like your feedback on the workshop. The QR code is on the last page of your participant handout. I'm not going to make you do it now just because we're right on time. But if you want to start it, make sure you can get to the survey. If anybody has any problems with it, then do it. But it's a little bit longer. They've lengthened it. So instead of used to take 2 minutes, now it's about 5. Just use the QR code, but we really would like your feedback. We improve these workshops straight out based on feedback that we get from our participants. And we also check things like, does it help polarization? And this is one of the workshops that does help polarization. Other workshops where we have equal parts red and blue participants or even higher to ending polarization. So we like to keep track of those statistics to see, how we're doing, where we can improve things. So if you, can please do both, we would love it. And then I can't play this because I'm not on the internet, but that's okay. I'd rather just get your feedback. So the last thing we do is a checkout. What are you taking home? So I'd just like to hear from a few people. What's the one, the one key thing that you've learned today that you think is really important that you're going to work on? What is that thing? Can you get a few people to share? Thank you.
Well, I think that I got the emphasis on listening first and asking non-threatening questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a very good thing to learn, which I don't always do. I mean, I'm always ready to state the truth. Or to, state my truth.
Anything you learned specific to like how you might depolarize yourself?
I think just learning more about where the other side's coming from and not assuming that I know. So fewer assumptions and a little more research.
Yes. Okay, great. Anyone else want to share? What are you taking home? What's that thing you're going to practice? Anything?
I think the fact that there's a methodology and that you've given a handout that we can think about later and use as a reminder to what we've talked about today. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
That just really raised my awareness of how people who are on my side are stressing me out too. About being polarizing, and I'm realizing that I need to have these conversations with the people I think I already agree with, but because some like I have a family member who hopes for the best but prepares for the worst, and they're talking about civil war, and it's just so upsetting. Yeah, and I'm realizing, wow, we really need depolarizing those just with the people I basically agree with, because they're stressing me out. Yeah, I hadn't really realized that till this conversation.
Yeah, well, good, thank you. Yeah, that was essentially the goal. How can we look at ourselves? How are we contributing? Who do we know that's also contributing? How can we help them bring that temperature down before now we can go, talk to the other side and maintain that composure and not get hijacked. Yeah, it's a great list. Anybody else, or we'll call it a wrap? Okay, we just end by, thank you, TJ, for having us again.
Thank you so much for coming back and
Yeah.
this incredibly important and very timely information, and just for everything that you do. We really appreciate the work of Braver Angels, and we look forward to having you guys back again and again. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for shortening it.
Yeah, and what we left out, you can use what we're gonna do next week, is just more the focus is on talking to the other side. But again, the skills you're gonna learn next week, if anybody, I hope everybody wants to come back. Mike's gonna be here. He's been here before. He's awesome. I love him. He's gonna teach you those, it's listening, acknowledging, pivot, which is kind of permission, how to jump in and say your perspective without pouncing on somebody, and then offering their perspective. So all those skills work the same. If you're talking to your own side, those people that you're like, just stop it, that get you all spun up, is the same skills you can use for talking to somebody from the other side. So rather than repeat those skills, we said we'll just do polarizing first, and then the listening, acknowledgement skills next week. So,
and the session next week is 90 minutes.
90 minutes, yes. So it's the same length as this, and we did good. I think we started at 5 to 11, so we went 5 minutes over. But and thank you, everybody. And there's full of snacks in the back, so if anybody wants to take some snacks with them, or thank you.